friends, welcome back to another musical moment in the life of the old-time rock and roller and the full-time blues man. Today, I have a very interesting story for you. It's a bunch of questions that I've gotten from the fans over the years, and I'm finally taking the time to answer them. Good enough? All right, here we go with the first question.
Okay, the first question is, I heard a funny story about What's It Gonna Take, that album. Can you tell us that story?
Okay, it was in California. We were recording at Prairie Sun Studio in Cotati, California. And I needed a set of acoustic guitar strings. So we stopped at a music store in Sausalito. And we walked in, and Raymond Victor, big white beard, kind of looked like Billy Gibbons. He walked up to the attendant at the counter. The guy said, "May I help you?" And Ray said, "Yeah, I'd like a set of those pre-cut, pre-tuned acoustic guitar strings for my friend." The guy said, "Okay, just a minute. Hey, do they make those?" And we got a big chuckle out of it because, of course, they didn't make it. But Ray just made it up on the spot. He's a funny guy like that. This is one called Southern Exposure.
Okay, question number 2. During your USO Tour in Asia in 1975, you had said something that had happened about some windshield wipers on that tour. Can you tell us that story again?
Okay. In 1975, the Nissans were coming out, the Toyotas were coming out. There was a lot of cars from Asia being produced and sold in America. And when I got in one of the cars in America, I noticed something very peculiar. You know, American cars, they say slow or fast for your windshield wiper speed. Well, I noticed that the foreign cars said L and S. And I thought, when we were on the USO tour in Korea and all through Asia, we used to get a bath by the local women on the base. Then they'd wash you and they'd say, "You want long time or you want short time?" And that kind of translated to the windshield wipers. When I saw it on the Toyota, I said, "Oh, long time, short time. I get it now." I know it's kind of silly, but it just came up, so that was it.
Okay, and the next question is, have you influenced any other guitarists or musicians?
It's a great question. In 2003, I was doing a tour with E.G. Kite, the Georgia Songbird, and we were playing at the Bradfordville Blues Club in Tallahassee, Florida. We had finished the first set, and a 16-year-old boy with his dad came up to me and he said, "My dad has taken me here for 4 years, and I have seen every blues artist on the road there is. And you are the best picker I ever seen, and I want to play just like you." So that really made me feel great. Well, a few years later, I met a friend named Darryl Cobb. Darryl was a great piano player and a country singer, and he played country guitar, but he got interested in the blues once we became friends. And he said, hey, how do you play that lick? So I'd show him one lick, and then it'd say, how about this solo? How does this go? So after about 2 years, I taught Daryl probably 50 of my solos. Well, he got good enough to where he would go out in Atlanta to the open mic nights. Now, I used to host the open mic jam at Darwin's, the first Darwin's in Marietta, Georgia. And my rhythm section was John McKnight and John Schwenke. Quarter ton of rhythm, we used to call them. And one night, John had a better, higher paying offer. And he said, hey man, I got, I said, well, who's the sub? And he said, a guy named Larry Griffith. He's a good drummer and a good singer. You'll like him. So Larry came out and he filled in for John. He did a great job. And on the break, I said, Larry, you sing good enough, man. You should get yourself a guitar, a Stratocaster, and go out front. Learn a couple of chords and just do it, man. You need to be a front man. So several years went by, and Larry followed my advice. He started playing the guitar, and he's playing all around Atlanta. Well, one night, my friend Daryl was out at the blues jams. His name came up, and they said, what do you want to play? And the Larry Griffith Band was hosting the jam. Well, Daryl said, I'd like to play some Forrest McDonald songs. Do you know any? And their lead guitar player said, Forrest McDonald? He's the reason I started playing guitar. It's just one of those feel-good moments. Every artist has them. Kind of makes your heart feel good. Next question.
Okay, here's another question from a fan. I heard that you have played with Mel Melton, Fingers Taylor, Little Ronnie, and I want to know the story about how that went.
Okay, my buddy Little Ronnie Owens and the Grand Dukes have been a legend around the Richmond, Virginia area for 3 decades. Ronnie would organize these harmonica jam blowouts, and he'd get some famous harmonica players. Now, one particular occasion, he had Mel Melton, who co-wrote Congo Square with the great slide player Sonny Landreth. He also had Greg Fingers Taylor, who played with Jimmy Buffett. And he put out a blues album of his own, and I met him in 2003 at the August Moon Festival in Winder, Georgia. Well, to make a long story short, when he found out that I was going to be sitting in with Ronnie at this jam session, he wanted to know more about me. So I sent him a YouTube link to my band introduction during riding on the blues train. And I went hog wild on that solo. I was tapping, I was whammy bar, dive bombing, I was fast picking, I was doing hammer-ons and pull-offs. It was just a terrific solo. when Fingers got to the club and it was time for him to get up and play, Ronnie had his band there to play. And Fingers said, "No, I'm getting up with him because I know what he can do." I mean, it was just totally cool. I was stoked. So, yes, it's a true story. I got to play at the same time with Ronnie Owens, with Greg Finger Taylor, and with Mel Melton, co-writer of Congo Square. Great song, by the way. Thanks for the question.
Okay, the next question is, have you ever met Ray Charles?
Wow. Ray is one of my idols, and I came this close to meeting him back in my Hollywood days. I was actually down at my connection's house getting some primo ganja. And we were there smoking a big one, and his phone rang, and it was Ray Charles. And he was in his limo, and he had a phone from the car, and he was right around the block. And he said, "Howie, you gotta go. Ray's coming over, and he doesn't want to meet anyone. He doesn't like anyone here when he gets here." I said, "Okay, I can understand that. I'll see you later." But I came within a frog's hair of meeting Ray Charles, and I love that man. He is such a genius.
This is one that somebody wanted to know. What is the story behind your song, "Wasn't Looking for Trouble"?
All right. I was recording some sides, 4 sides, with my friend Lawrence Proman, and we were working on the Voodoo Screamer album. Quarter Ton of Rhythm was going to meet us at a gas station about a half a mile from the studio. Well, there was a Kroger store right nearby, and I knew they made great deli sandwiches. We were recording right around lunchtime, and I said the guys would love some sandwiches. So I went over, got some sandwiches, and it was very odd because I noticed almost like a gang of teenage hoodlums running through the store with walkie-talkies, and they appeared to be following a young lady. Well, I got out to the car, put my sandwiches in, started to back up, and all of a sudden an old Chevy Impala blocks me in, but also blocks a very pretty young 19-year-old girl, as it turned out, getting into her car. And 4 of them jumped out of the car and tried to abduct her and pull her into the Impala. I said, "Oh man, I got a studio session book. I'm 50 years old. I've retired from the boxing world for a long time. Let me at least get the license number." So I got out, wrote down the license plate number, and the driver of the car got out. And this guy was so big that when he stood up, I had to kind of look up there, and he said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "Write down your license number." He said, "Oh no, you're not." Well, it turned into a massive brawl. I hit him with one straight punch to the nose and knocked him out. But the other 4 guys let the girl alone, and she got in her car, and they came running over my way. And I was fighting the 4 of them. I had Kung Fu training about 28 years. But this was pretty intense. Well, my friend Lawrence, who was in the car looking over his poetry, and thought, "Oh, Forrest knows how to take care of himself." So he just sat in the car. Well, finally, he realized once the big guy got back up, he said, "Maybe I should get out." So the second he got out of the car, one of them ran over and clotheslined him like a wrestler, and he just dropped to the canvas, only it was the concrete. So I took about 22 punches to the head, fighting backwards, till they finally pinned me against the car, held me down, and hit me on the temple and the jaw with one of those old big cell phones. And I dropped to the floor, and finally somebody, an old man, came by and said, "Hey, stop that, call the police." So they took off, and they crashed into another car leaving, and I stumbled back to my car, and I had blood dripping down me, and my shirt was torn apart. And the police came, and they said, "Well, give us a statement." I gave him a quick statement, and he said, "All right, you got to go to the emergency room." I said, "No, I don't. I've got a session to do, and I'm a half an hour late." So we drove up to the gas station. Quarter Ton was there, and they looked at us and said, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" I told them briefly, and Schwanky said, "Let's get him." And I said, "No, we got it. Look, dude, we're late. We're paying by the hour. Let's go." So after a 4-hour session, I finally got home. I had the worst headache of all time, but I wrote a song. I wasn't looking for trouble, but trouble found me, and I'll be doing unto others as they'll be doing unto me. And I'll put a link to it in this song. I'll put a link to it in the description. You'll love it. It's a great song. At least I got the song out of it. You always go for a positive. Take any negative experience and turn it around. I'll give you an example of what I mean. In the 8th grade, I had bought a snare drum with money from my paper route, and I joined the 8th grade band, and I thought I'd be a drummer. Well, the first class, they were just sort of sorting everybody out. The second class was a real lesson where you had to beat on time, and I just couldn't do it. And the music teacher was so frustrated, he took the chalkboard eraser, he threw it at me, he knocked my music stand over and my music, and he said, "Pick up your snare drum and get out." So I picked up the snare drum, I threw the drum book in the trash on the way out, and I picked up the guitar, and I never looked back. It was the biggest favor he could have ever done for me. So always try and take any negative experience, make lemonade from those lemons, my friend. Now.
Okay, another question is, can you tell us a little more about Steve Jablecky and the Wadsworth Mansion?
Well, as most of you know, we had a hit record out called Sweet Mary, I'm Coming Home, and did a 35-state tour with Alice Cooper and Edgar Winter. Well, after the band broke up, Steve and I moved to LA and put together a new group that eventually fizzled out, and he went back home to Rhode Island. Well, many years later, I went back, and he was driving his motorcycle through his parking lot, and he hit like a speed bump kind of thing, and he went flying through the air about 30 feet, maybe 40 miles an hour, head first into his own car's windshield. And he was in a coma for 2 weeks. The doctor said, "I don't think we'll ever bring him out of it. Maybe we should move him to somewhere else." His parents, who we never really had a relationship, but they called me and they said, "Look, can you go over to the hospital and do anything you possibly can to maybe wake him up?" So I said, "Of course." So I rode over there. I went in and I saw him just lying there, still as a board. I walked up to him. I said, "Steve," I went right to his ear. "Steve, it's Howie. We got to go for the gig, man. It's time to go. We need to pack up and leave now." I waited a minute. I said, "Steve, it's Howie. It's showtime. We got to get on stage, man. Get yourself together. We're going on in 5 minutes." And I stood there and waited, and one eye moved. And then it opened. And I had reached him in his deepest subconscious. And within another week, he was totally awake, and they let him out of the hospital. That was a great thing to do for anyone, especially an old friend. Steve Jablecky, rest in peace, my brother.
It says, this question said you had an opportunity to play with Bonnie Bramlett. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Well, actually, I did get to play with Bonnie. It was an opportunity to play with the Allman Brothers that I missed out on. I had played with Bonnie at the Palomino Club in my Hollywood days, and we got along very well, and she sang the song, Since I Met You, Baby. And it's since I met you, baby, since I met you, baby, my whole life has changed. And then the punchline, well, she sang, Since I Met You, Howie McDonald, my whole life has changed. And on the break, she kept telling me, you know, you remind me of someone. You remind me of someone. And it wasn't long after doing the Delaney and Bonnie with Eric Clapton tour. So I had an idea who she was referring to. Well, after I left LA and moved to Muscle Shoals, she just had an old address on me. And she sent me a postcard, and then somebody forwarded it to me in Muscle Shoals. And it was, hey, I'm down here in Macon in a cabin in the woods with the Allman Brothers. You would be great for this situation. Come on by, here's the address. I threw my stuff in the car. Man, ever since Dwayne played my Firebird in 1969, I wanted to be in that band, the first note I ever heard of them. It's not easy finding a cabin in the wood, folks, but I found it. And there was a guy cleaning up, and he said, yep, they just moved out yesterday. And there was about a 2-week delay between the postcard arriving at my old address and the new address. So I almost maybe had a shot to play with the Allman Brothers. I'll never know, but Bonnie, bless your heart, thank you for thinking of me. What a great lady, a great singer, and she's still putting out great music today.
Okay, speaking of the Allman Brothers, have you ever met Warren Haynes or Susan Tedeschi?
That's a great question, too. Because in 2017, thereabouts, I was at the Post Handy Jam session. Susan had won Female Blues Artist of the Year, and Government Mule was performing at the awards ceremony. There's always a very famous jam session sponsored by Gibson Guitars after the awards. And frequently I would be called up to play. On one particular night, there were several guitarists on stage, and I was soloing like mad, and all of a sudden, a Warren Haynes lick jumped into my head. It was one that I played myself, but I had heard him do it on an Allman Brothers record that a friend of mine brought by, a live tape, some years before that. So I threw the lick in, and we finished the jam, and it was great. And I turned around and went to put my axe away, and I saw sitting on 2 Gibson amplifiers, Warren Haynes and Susan Tedeschi. And they both jumped up and said, that was really great. She said, I'm Susan. And I said, very nice to meet you and congratulations. And he said, and I'm Warren Haynes. And I said, forget about that. I'm a fan of yours, man. You are awesome. But we walked up the street talking about chocolate. I had some chocolate. Warren loves chocolate. And we walked up to the Rum Boogie Cafe and then went our separate ways. A caveat to the story about Bonnie Bramlett is she actually named the Average White Band. She was in LA and they had come there for their first time and they didn't really have a name. And she said, how about the Average White Band? And it took. So that was that story.
You have one fan that wants to know the story behind The River of Tears.
Okay, that's a great song, and Andrew Black did an incredible job on the album singing it. I was talking about taking a negative and making it a positive. After my second marriage ended, I went out on my back porch and I was sad. And there was a pile of dirt, you know, there was a path that went around the porch that was just dirt, no grass grew there. And I was thinking about the marriage and the time put in, and my son had said to me, "Dad, I tried to keep you together as long as I could." And it really touched me. So I started to cry, and a tear fell down into the dust. And the more I thought about it and lamented, more tears fell. And first came a stream, now there's a river there. I just took the experience, wrote the hook, and then came up with the lyrics to fill in around it. But that's essentially how it came to be.
The ground was dusty, parched and bare. First came a stream, now there's a river there. After all these years, all I've got to show is a river.
So once again, every bad experience doesn't have to end as a negative, because with every end, there's a new beginning. And with every beginning, there's a new end. Thank you, my friends, for coming along on this musical moment. Keep love in your heart. Subscribe if you wish, and I will see you down the musical highway on the next adventure of the old-time rock and roller, lifetime bluesman. So long, my friends.